In today's episode, I will be going over our plan to go from making $0 to over $100,000 per month in the next 12 months through podcast sponsorships. Welcome to the Millionaire University podcast, where you can learn more in one short episode about making money than several years of school. And now, to present you with today's episode, your millionaire mentor, Justin Williams. What's up, guys? Wow, thank you for that intro and applause. You guys are awesome. This is incredible. So as mentioned today, I'm going to break down our plan to go from making nada, zip, zilch, and nothing to making over $100,000 per month through podcasting sponsorships. Now, if I'm being totally honest, I'm feeling a little anxious right now because I'm about to put this goal that we have out there to the world, and I don't totally know if we're going to be able to accomplish it. So I might end up with mud on my face. I might end up looking like an idiot. But regardless of if we succeed at this goal or if we fall flat on our face, if sharing this helps just one person out there improve their business and their life, then it will all be worth it. Please let that person be you. Please. Now, first off, why do we want to do this? And a word about creating goals. When we first started Millionaire University, we were very clear with each other that we wanted to do something that would help people, that would make money, and wouldn't have a negative impact on our family or lifestyle. We had and still have a lot of ideas of different things that we could possibly and may end up doing with the Millionaire University platform. And until recently, focusing on sponsorships really was not one of those things. But as we just begin to move forward and create content and learning and growing and struggling and fumbling and faltering and getting back up and dusting ourselves up and learning again, combined with our goals and different things that have come up in our life in the past few months and different goals that we have and things that we want to do, which we'll also get more into in another podcast. And as I started listening to other people's podcasts and then going down these different rabbit holes of different things that were possible, it suddenly hit me that podcast sponsorships could be the very thing that we've been looking for, which is absolutely crazy because if I'm being honest, which is really hard to say right now, our download numbers, our listen numbers are absolutely abysmal. Like not even a couple weeks ago, we're like, what is going on? What are we doing? We've done other podcasts before. Why does this one have so many fewer downloads? Like it would have been so easy to throw in the towel. But instead, we're doubling, tripling, 10xing down and really leaning in and now have this BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal of growing the podcast in ways that seem absolutely ludicrous right now and getting to the point where we're making over $100,000 per month within 12 months just from sponsorships. I'm scared. But we are pushing that scared voice aside and we are moving forward. So for the rest of the episode, I'm going to break down some hypothetical numbers of how we plan to accomplish this. This will give you a better look inside my brain, could be kind of scary, and how I go about making goals and plans and creating seven-figure businesses. So I listen to lots of podcasts and I hear sponsors all the time. And I kind of had an idea of how much money some people make from their sponsorships, but I didn't really know or understand the exact numbers. So that's the first thing that I decided to look at. Now, there's lots of nuance that we will get into in future episodes, but to keep it short, for the most part, the way podcast sponsorships work are based on a per 1,000 listens. The cost fluctuates, but the industry standard is about $18 for a shorter 15 to 30 second pre or post roll, and about $25 for a longer, around 1 minute mid-roll commercial. So the question I kept asking myself was not can we, but how can we get to $100,000 per month through sponsorships? So I thought, okay, if we have 3 ads per podcast, 2 shorter ones, 1 mid-roll that's a little bit longer, we should be able to make about $60 per every 1,000 listens or impressions that we have. So I did some basic math and thought, well, what if we have 100,000 listens per month? 4 episodes per month, that would be 25,000 listens per episode, which is way, way higher than where we're at right now. And then I realized that would only make us $6,000 per month, which was way off from our $100,000 goal. Then the other day, as I was reading through a couple blog posts on Entrepreneurs on Fire, I read a blog post where John Lee Dumas broke down a hypothetical scenario of how much money you could make if you had 10,000 listens per episode. And 2 things really stuck out to me. First off, in this example he talks about having 2 sponsors in the pre and mid roll, something that didn't even occur to me before. So if you had one sponsor paying for a pre and a mid-roll ad with 10,000 listens, you could make $430 per episode. Two sponsors would put you up to $860 per episode. The other thing that really stuck out to me, and something that I've considered before, but didn't totally make a lot of sense to me until we started going down this path and seeing this blog post, was if you do 4 episodes in this scenario, you'd make $3,440 per month. If you do 8 episodes per month in this scenario, you'd make $6,880 per month. And if you did an episode every day or 30 episodes per month, you'd make $25,800 per month. Mind blown. So the easy and obvious math to me was if you take that $25,000 per episode and you multiply it by 4, that gets you to your $100,000 per episode. But that's based on 10,000 listens. So based on this scenario, 40,000 listens per episode should get us to our $100,000 per month goal. Here are a few scenarios I came up with. We could shoot for 80,000 listens per episode and do a show every other day or 15 shows per month with 2 sponsors in each show, and that would get us to $100,000 per month. We could shoot for 40,000 listens and do a daily show to get to the $100,000 per month. Or we could do a daily show and shoot for 80,000 listens per episode with 1 sponsor per show and reach our goal. Or you could do 1 show per week with 1 sponsor and you would have to hit 560,000 downloads to reach your goal of $100,000 per month. Needless to say, the daily show with 2 sponsors seemed to make the most sense to me. Now, creating a weekly show and as much content as we have been creating while still maintaining our lifestyle and family focus has already been a bit of a stretch. So it'd be really easy to say, oh, there's no way we could do a daily show. But once again, the question is not can, but how can and when. So we'll get into that more in future episodes and you will see it unfold before your very eyes. But if we immediately shot that down as an impossibility, we never would have explored the possibilities of how it could happen. So the next question you might be asking, and the big, huge elephant in the room, is how the heck are we going to go from an abysmal, I shouldn't say abysmal because even though it's a small number, if there's just one person that can be impacted and affected by anything we have to say, then it's worth it. But at the current about 100 listens per episode, ouch. We would probably be making about a whopping 100 buckaroonies per year. So we have got a long ways to go. So as we've been thinking about the how do we get to 50,000 listens per episode and how daunting that number seems. I mean, we're talking 1.5 million listens per month versus just under 400 per month currently. So 3,750 times larger. Woo, doggy. So I started to research all the different ways that you can grow your podcast. Now, in another episode, we can go through all of these different ways, and there's no doubt that we will be trying and sharing with you a bunch of them along the way. But I'm a big fan and a believer in the one thing. What's the one thing, the one way, the one path, the biggest bang for your buck, the main thing that you can focus on that will get you the biggest result? Now, it often takes a lot of trying of the potential one thing before you find the one thing. But it all starts with a theory. And that's what I currently have. It all started about a week ago when I was at the gym with our family, getting those gains, as my kids like to say. In my case, it's more like just trying to maintain any ounce of muscle that I possibly can. Sometimes some of us will work out together, but on this day, everyone was kind of doing their own thing. And I found myself listening to the Marketing School podcast with Eric Sue and Neil Patel. And they were talking about the things that they've done to grow their podcast to 1.8, almost 2 million listens per month. And their goal to get to 5 or 10 million listens per month in the future. They talked about a bunch of the things that they've done, but they said the main thing that has worked the best are what they refer to as impression swaps. Otherwise, finding a big podcaster and saying, hey, we will trade you 500,000 impressions or listens where we advertise your podcast on our show if you do the same for us. They talked about a collaboration that they were currently doing with the podcast My First Million and how they had done one with Jordan Harbinger in the past. I was aware that the My First Million guys were in the HubSpot podcast network with John Lee Dumas, Amy Porterfield, and a host of other very successful podcasters. And I knew they were constantly doing the same thing, mentioning each other's podcast. I've also listened to several other big podcasts where I've heard Jordan Harbinger promoting his show. And I knew he had a big following, and they went on to mention that he's spent millions of dollars promoting his podcast. Now, I have done plenty of interview swaps, as you might call them, or more so I've had other people ask me to be on their podcast, and or I've asked other people to be on my podcasts in the past. But it had never really crossed my mind to actually pay someone to promote my podcast. I mean, the truth is doing an impression swap just wasn't really that feasible right now with how low our downloads are. The juice would just currently not be worth the squeeze, as they say. Or another way of looking at it, we would not be making very much per hour, probably significantly less than minimum wage. Anyway, it just doesn't make sense with our numbers right now. I knew we had to get our numbers up first before we try doing this so-called impression swaps. But what about just straight up paying other big shows to promote our show on their show? Now, I love running numbers, and my years of investing in real estate has helped me to really hone in and understand returns and the velocity of money. And if you move money several times per year, what's your annualized return and all kinds of fun things. I'm not that good at math, but just very simple addition and multiplication we're talking here. So the thought crossed my mind, I wonder what your ROI would be to pay someone to promote your podcast. Because essentially there's two different ways to grow in business. You either work your way in or you buy your way in, and you typically do a combination of both. But I thought to myself, if Neil Patel and Eric Sue are saying the best way they've grown is by having other people mention them on their podcast, and I knew smart guys like Jordan Harbinger were spending millions in promoting their podcast, I thought there has to be something there. So I thought, what would be the cost of acquiring a listener, and what would the return be that you could make from that new listener, assuming you were to get sponsorships of your own down the road? I thought, okay, if you were to spend $25 per 1,000 impressions on a podcast to advertise your show, and you decide to spend $2,500 to purchase 100,000 impressions, how many new listeners could that promotion get you? Now, of course, there would be a lot that would go into the answer to this question. Obviously, the amount of listeners you would get from one show to the next or one promotion to the next would vary. But at this point, I was just considering the what ifs, the possibilities. So I started to run some numbers, and I started to run these by Tara. And I said, hey, do you think if you were to get 100,000 people or impressions to hear an advertisement on your podcast, how many of those do you think would become listeners? Do you think 1% maybe? So like maybe 1,000 out of the 100,000? The truth is I had no idea if this was super high or super low or what. But the numbers I was running on this hypothetical possibility were blowing my mind. Assuming these numbers worked and we did a daily show, our return in the first year would be well over 200% on the money invested. Now, if you invest $10,000 and you make $20,000 that year, and then you make $20,000 each year after that, and you no longer have to invest that $10,000, your return exponentializes. I then thought, even if we only convert 1 in 1,000 listeners, we would still be at above a 20% return in that first year. So I wanted to do some research and find out if my theory was completely insane. And I came across this short podcast where this guy, I think it was titled something like The Sad Truth About Podcast Advertising Returns or something along those lines. And I was like, oh no, here it goes. He's going to totally burst my bubble. My theory must be way off. And he said he went to an event where the CEO of Chartable, which is actually something that we're just learning about right now. We don't know a ton about it at this moment, but it's a way to see how other podcasts are performing and how you compare to them. But more interestingly, in our situation is how you can track where your podcast views are coming from or something along those lines. But I digress. We will get more into that later on. But what he said that this CEO said at this event was that you should expect about 7 or 8 new listeners for every 1,000 impressions you pay for through podcast advertising. which comes to about 0.75% conversion rate. So while this number was lower than my 1% theory, it was still actually really exciting. So then Tara was doing some research on the Buzzsprout website since we were considering doing some advertising with them. And on their website, it said you should expect 20 to 30 new listens for every 10,000 impressions, and that keeping them as listeners would depend on you. At first I was stoked. I thought, oh, that's like 2 to 3%. And so we just have to keep like 1/3 of them and we'll be killing it. And then I was like, oh, wait, I'm way off on this calculation. It's like 1/10 of what I thought. It's actually like 0.2 to 0.3%. And then you have to keep them. At least advertising with Buzzsprout was only $17 per 1,000 impressions versus the $25 that I was using to run my numbers. But those numbers were blowing my theory out of the water. So at this point, all we can do is try it out. We actually just started dabbling, doing some advertisement with Buzzsprout to test that out. And we paid for 30,000 impressions through a company called AdvertiseCast, I believe is the name, to run some ads on the Misfit Entrepreneur podcast starting next week. So it'll be fun to see where that goes. But here are some possible hypothetical numbers. At first, after listening to the one podcast I listened to, I was going to run the numbers off of 0.75%. But then after hearing about the Buzzsprout conversion, I'm not quite sure what to think. Needless to say, I'll be doing a lot more research over the next few days, and it'll be exciting to see the results of both the Buzzsprout and the AdvertiseCast promotions. But let's say that hypothetically, we are able to convert 0.25%, otherwise 1/4 of 1% of people that hear our podcast advertised on other shows to listeners of our show. So we're talking like 1 in 400. So if we were to focus purely on promoting our podcast on other podcasts with the goal of getting to the 40,000 listeners per episode mark, and we were converting at 0.25%, we would need 16 million impressions. But if you take 16 million and you divide it by 1,000, since you purchase impressions by the 1,000, that would give you 16,000 units of 1,000 to purchase. Now, we're currently spending $30 per 1,000 impressions with AdvertiseCast since they're kind of a broker and they go in between, so it costs a little bit more. But using those numbers and multiplying 16,000 times 30 for the 16,000 units of 1,000, hopefully I'm not overly confusing everyone, it comes to $480,000. Which I'm not sure if I'm running my numbers wrong, but that's absolutely insane, because what that means is if those numbers are even remotely accurate, is that by spending $480,000 on podcast advertising, we could get to that $100,000 per month mark, or 1.2 million for the year, which is like a 200 to close to 300% return on that first investment made, which is interesting because that's the initial hypothetical number that I came to. And the reason I think it still pencils out in this scenario is because even though I cut my numbers in 1/3 or 1/4 from my initial 1% or 0.75% to 0.25% conversion ratio, those numbers did go up quite a bit after reading the article about what John Lee Dumas mentioned about having more than one advertiser per podcast and how much you could make from each show based on a daily show at 10,000 listens per episode. Okay, so I know that's a lot. That's a lot for me. Hopefully I've done all my math right. I'll probably have to have Tara listen to this and make sure I don't sound like a complete lunatic. And here's the thing, like, this ain't my first rodeo. I ain't no dummy. Like, I have no doubt that things will not pencil out this easy. Like, we're not just going to spend $500,000 to then make 1.2 million every year thereafter. But what I want you to grasp and understand is this what if, this Walt Disney room, as he would have, where he would say, what if, like, what's possible? Just questioning this and wondering how it can be done is what has allowed us to come up with some of these hypothetical possibilities that we can now take to the lab and go test and take action on and get real actual data from. And even if the numbers are a half or 1/4 this good, along with all the other things that we're going to be doing, bringing on other people to interview and help host the podcast, doing other kinds of advertising and promoting and cross-promoting on social media and email. And as one thing grows, growing another thing. And then as the podcast grows, doing those impression swaps where we now don't have to pay as much money for promoting because we can now leverage the large platform and audience that we have, which will allow us to get more and bigger guests that also have a big following that will then hopefully share their interview on our podcast with their audience and give us more opportunities to get on other shows with big audiences as well. Not to mention, as we continue to expand and start to use YouTube and grow our audience there and be able to advertise there. And then the revenue generated from sponsors that we have on our show will help us be able to pay to promote the podcast even more. But not only that, but to hire people to help grow the entire Millionaire University platform, and thus helping more people change their life, who then share with other people so they can change their life. And I just love it. I love being an entrepreneur. It's like the funnest, coolest, most awesome game ever. And you get to help people along the way. Are you freaking kidding me? Let's go. Okay, sorry. I'm back now. With that, I think we better go before I get a little too carried away here. But before we do, let's talk about the key takeaways from this episode. Number one, if you have not started taking action on your business yet, what are you waiting for? Start today. If you don't know what business you want to start or you don't have a ton of time, don't worry about it. Follow these 5 simple steps. Number 1, pick a topic you're interested in. Number 2, do research on this topic each week. Number 3, connect with someone each week who is an expert in or has an interest in this same topic. Number 4, pick a topic such as podcasting, blogging, or YouTube. And number 5, using the research that you did that week and or the connections that you made, publish one piece of content on your platform each week. After doing this consistently for 12 weeks, you will come across more lucrative business opportunities than you even know what to do with. Pick one of those platforms and leverage your connections, knowledge, and platform to launch your new business. Or at least come up with a simple plan, kind of like what we talked about today. It might be theoretical, but as you come up with even a hypothetical plan and as you continue to move forward, you'll continue to gather information and it'll become more and more clear as you go what you need to do to be successful in your business and the direction that you want to go based on what you want out of life. So don't delay. You have absolutely nothing to lose, but a whole lot to gain, and it is so much fun. And if you are not doing so yet, be sure to follow us on whatever podcast app you are currently using, and go to millionaireuniversity.com to get our free business training and sign up for our newsletter so you can continue to be updated on all the crazy, awesome stuff we have going on here at Millionaire University, and we can continue to support you in your journey. And let's see if we make it. We got 12 months to get to 100K or more through podcast sponsorships. It's not going to be easy, but it should be a fun ride. Until then, this is Justin Williams, your Chief Money Making Officer, signing off.